Hormazd Sorabjee joining in, editor Autocar India. Hormazd, very good morning, and thank you so much for coming in on 31st morning and speaking to us about what the year looks like. Really appreciate it. Let's
Well,
just...
well, I'm in Mahabaleshwar. It's nice and cool here, so
Yeah.
I'm not complaining.
Well, we envy you and wish you a great weekend in Mahabaleshwar. Let's start with sort of the recap. I think a big push that the auto industry has been asking for is easing of GST. And that finally happened this year. Do you think that is one of the big headlines, if I were to ask you, for 2025, along with a wider adoption for electric vehicles?
Yeah, actually, it is the biggest headline because I think, 2025, it started off on a pretty flat note. It was getting muted. And I think it really came as a booster shot, a very welcome booster shot. And I think more than just the GST cut, I think manufacturers use that to even adjust their pricing. So it went even, the benefits to the consumer went even beyond the GST cut. So I think that was a massive trigger, and we are seeing the kind of momentum of that continuing onwards. It really we have to see how it pans out in 2026, but I think it's been a lot of, let's say, positive sentiment. People have been buying, but interesting. Sometimes the GST cuts have impacted some segments more, and in fact, even had a negative impact on certain segments. So clearly showing where the customer preferences are when they're getting a price benefit.
Why the negative impact on certain segments, Hormazd? So can you elaborate on that point?
Yeah, so I think the hatchback segment or the absolute bottom end of the pyramid was expected to grow with these GST cuts, but that hasn't happened. I think where the maximum benefit has happened is in the sub 4 meter, the compact SUV segment, just below 10 lakhs. I think that has seen the maximum benefit. Interestingly, the delta between ICE and EVs has come down. And that has actually impacted the EV demand because, you had gone up to 48% in some of the really, highly taxed vehicles like diesel SUVs. That's come down. There's been no kind of, let's say, change in the 5% GST on EVs. So, that price parity, which certain, products were having ICE versus EV, now it's more in favor of ICE. So it's really interesting that, EVs clearly need all the help and subsidy they can have. And clearly, this was one sort of, let's say, a different kind of impact of, let's say, the ICE becoming a little bit more price competitive compared to the EVs.
Okay, so we're talking about price sensitivity here, Hormazd. Good morning, Hiral here. One aspect we need to talk about is the kind of margin impact that all of these companies could see on the back of the way raw material prices have moved so far. And in consonance to that, a lot of them have already announced price hikes in the month of January. If you have to put 2 plus 2 together, do you think the price hikes that have been announced will be kind of enough to offset this kind of margin pressure that could be coming in on the back of raw material price hikes? And what does that trajectory look like going into 2026?
Yeah, I think we've seen that everyone's going to increase their prices. In Jan, we've seen how the rupee has depreciated. And don't forget, whatever we say, we still import a lot of our components. We may be localized at a tier 1 level, but at a tier 2, tier 3 level, we still unfortunately depend on a lot of imports. So that definitely does have an impact. And I think, companies, it's not a very high margin business, the auto industry right now. So they will be raising prices. Of course, they'll be seeing how consumers react to that. But typically, I think it's always been a trend that in January, prices do go up for the 2026 models. So I think overall the sentiment I think is still quite positive, and I think I think taking the price up was practically expected because as you said, margin pressure is there, and costs of everything is going up. Raw materials, as I said, components are still imported at tier 2, tier 3 level, and rupee weakening. That's all kind of combining to put huge pressure on the margins.
Okay, Hormazd, good morning, Neeraj here. Enjoy Mahabaleshwar, of course. I echo Tamanna, I envy you. I presume, excuse me for that presumption that you are largely a car enthusiast, but I want to ask you if you have a thought on a potential CV upcycle, Hormuz? Maybe you don't, in which case I'll rephrase my question. But do you have a thought on a potential CV upcycle?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I've not really tracked it, but
Chuck
I
it.
think
Chuck it. I
really,
have a question on cars then. Let me ask you that. The question is this, that while EVs proliferate, there is, RC Bhargava has been on record saying that India is a market for hybrids, right? And I wonder if you believe that that stays true, in which case it's advantage Toyota, Maruti to some extent, because I see them as the only ones which are making hybrids.
well, I think everyone's making hybrids. They've just
Oh,
not
okay.
announced their plans. Yeah, so I think right from Tata to the Koreans, Hyundai, Mahindra, they're all doing hybrids. I think a lot of them don't talk about it because they've kind of invested a lot in EVs, and that's really the direction the government has pushed them into. So I think what we've not talked about at all is Cafe 3, which is going to really shape the portfolios going forward. It's not necessarily what the customer wants, but it's by regulation you'd be forced to do it. So I think hybrids is a way to go forward. But talking about hybrids, I think absolutely necessary. I've had enough practical experience of struggling charging an EV on the highways. It's not so much the network penetration, it's just the reliability of the network. It's still very much a hit and miss, and largely to do with the infrastructure of power availability, and just not that convenient at all. So I think hybrids have a definite future. Everyone's looking at it, and it's not just because EV penetration isn't picking up. In cafe, hybrids get a benefit, and I think everyone's looking at that. In fact, what could happen is that you might see a lot of people getting out of diesel. Again, not because there's no customer demand, but because the regulations, in a way, let's say they don't penalize diesel, but you've got these super credits which really help hybrids. So companies like Toyota, which were so heavily, let's say, their backbone was the Innova Crystal diesel, that might disappear by 2027 and replaced with some other powertrain. So I think, hybrids definitely have a future in India, and rightfully so, because our EVs penetration, I mean, our EV infrastructure is still nowhere near as where it should be. To take, let's say, we've got 7%, we've got about 5% penetration of EVs. And that's nearly double from last year because of so many players coming in. But I think, it's going to kind of hit a wall if we don't see the infrastructure improving.
Okay. We are just talking about all the numbers that have come in, but one interesting thing that has happened with regards to new launches is Hyundai. Now, they've gone ahead and launched a taxi version. Hormazd, what would you have to say to it? I mean, taxi versions of Aura, Grand i10 Neos. Does this really work?
Well, I think fleet sales is what gives everyone volumes. You have to balance, everyone balances volumes versus brand. A lot of, like, let's say, Mahindra, for example, they don't want to go into the fleet segment. They kind of feel that there's enough pull on their SUVs, from the personal sector. But I think it's really when you have products like the Aura and the Grand i10, which are really, in terms of where they are positioned, it makes sense to be in the fleet segment for them. So I think that with the CNG option works quite well over them. But I think one point talking about Hyundai, which I think is quite significant. I think in 2025 was marked by a big change in the pecking order. So Hyundai was number 2, they've dropped to number 4, Vahan data. And Mahindra is now the number 2 player in 2025. So, you have Maruti on top, which is really way ahead of everyone. But below, the pecking order has changed, and Mahindra has emerged as the number 2 auto player in 2025.
I mean, that I think is the big upset going into 2026 that has happened. Okay, Hormazd, before we let you go, your one top prediction of 2026.
I think 2026 is going to be, I think, a bit of a tough year because there are going to be people kind of rejigging their portfolios. As I said, for Cafe 3, we are going to be see brands on the sidelines which you not talked about. They're not listed. Volkswagen, Skoda, for example, they will be facing challenges because we don't see them being Cafe 3 ready. So I think costs are definitely going to go up as brands have to invest in new technologies. So while we've had a great run in 2025 thanks to GST, I think I'd be a little bit more measured in 2026 going forward. So yeah, I think it's challenging for the auto industry purely because of the way the regulations are panning out.
Okay, Hormazd, wish you a very happy new year and great weather in Matharan. Thank you so much for joining in. And here's to an exciting 2026 one way or the other.
Thanks, Tamana, and happy new year to you all.
Thank you.